Hey everybody, it's Jenna. This video is inspired by one of the funniest talking points that I've seen come out of the trailers and early marketing for Thunderbolts, Bucky Barnes now being a sitting US congressman. In addition to plenty of memes, a lot of people have pointed out how weird this must feel to civilians in the MCU. After all, Bucky has been around for over a century thanks to the super soldier serum and has a decades-long past as a brainwashed villain for another country. He's also still actively doing superhero things in public while in this new role. I've loved every single meme about it, but it did get me thinking about exactly why Bucky being in Congress feels so weird, and how our perception of costumed heroes and villains moonlighting in the government has changed. While there is not exact precedent for Bucky serving in the government in the comics, plenty of other characters have histories of doing so. Before the events of The Killing Joke and her being rebranded as a sort of technology whiz, Barbara Gordon served on the House of Representatives in the 1980s while also balancing her tenure as Batgirl. The original Flash, Jay Garrick, became the mayor of a town called Monument Point after it was nearly destroyed by one of the Justice Society of America's villains. Oliver Queen / Green Arrow has had multiple high-profile campaigns for mayor, losing in the 1970s and eventually winning during the 1 year later storyline in the 2000s. Inside and outside of the main continuity, Oswald Cobblepot / the Penguin has served as a controversial mayor of Gotham City, and of course, there's the whole story arc with President Lex Luthor, where he successfully became the 43rd president instead of George W. Bush, only to get impeached after trying to kill Superman. There have been similar political roles in the Marvel universe, albeit a bit more fleeting. Tony Stark used his reputation and arsenal as Iron Man to serve as the government's Secretary of Defense. Luke Cage and Kingpin both served as mayors of New York City with wildly different outcomes, and the latter storyline currently being explored on screen in Daredevil Born Again. And plenty of what-ifs and future set stories have explored what it would be like if Captain America, Thor, Norman Osborn, or an adult Kamala Khan were president. These are only a few of the examples of superheroes moonlighting in their government, but I think they help illustrate why we feel the way that we do about Bucky suddenly joining Congress. To an extent, the storylines in these comics can be sorted into a few different buckets. There are characters like Tony and Jay who intentionally use their reputation as superheroes to assume a new role as a way of sort of taking matters into their own hands. There are characters like Barbara and Oliver who try to keep their civilian and secret superhero identities separate in the government and genuinely want another outlet to do good in their community. And then there are the villains like Lex, Kingpin, and Oz, whose entire campaigns and candidacies are rooted in the good guys and the readers knowing already that they are villains. They might try to change the narrative and gaslight the world into thinking that they have more positive contributions to society, or they might fully lean into it as a way to create conflict between the superheroes and their government. On the surface, MCU Bucky seems nebulously between these three extremes, or in a completely different category altogether. There's really no indication of what the Winter Soldier's reputation currently is in the world of the MCU. How many people are even aware of his actions as the Winter Soldier, or did all of that just get brushed aside after he helped in the Battle of Endgame? Anything we have gotten has been on an incredibly micro level, whether in the story beats from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which were essentially tossed aside as the show moved along, or in his very brief cameo in Captain America: Brave New World. Both of these scenes function just to move the larger plot forward first and foremost. Maybe Thunderbolts will lean further into it, but that doesn't feel like a guarantee given how many plot points that movie has to juggle. It feels like Bucky was slotted into the role to provide an easy outlet for exposition, and not because it absolutely made sense for his trajectory as a character. There's also the problem, which arguably has been a problem with the MCU basically since its inception, of secret identities. Almost every major superhero is public-facing, to the point of there being no clear line between their reputations as crime fighters and any lives that they might lead or want to lead as civilians. Sometimes this leads to them being treated as a sort of in-universe celebrity, and other times it almost turns them into a caricature who just sits around waiting for the next superhero battle. The only big exceptions are Daredevil, only because his status quo was grandfathered in from the Netflix show, and Spider-Man, which No Way Home took to a complete opposite extreme anyway. Bucky hasn't had anything close to a secret identity since the events of the Winter Soldier, and if anything, his public life has been directly threatened and manipulated by the superhero things going on around him. Seeing him sit in Congress and then flip a car with his bare hands without any sort of disguise or differentiation between the two makes us, in the audience, feel like we missed something. Granted, a larger argument can be made that there's a lot of story beats in the MCU that we've missed, but it makes this one a particularly funny one. I also think we feel weird about Bucky joining Congress because, to put it simply, our cultural relationship with politics and politicians has fluctuated wildly. The line between politics and celebrity has changed to the point of it now being eroded massively. That is a whole separate conversation in and of itself, but I do find it interesting how that both has and hasn't been reflected in the comics. Superhero comics will always be political, even at their most hopeful and escapist. I have an entire video about that if you want to know more. And they often function as a snapshot of their time and as a sort of outlet out of it. We've had countless real-life presidents cameo in comics, or even other real-life figures who became presidents in a sort of what-if scenario. Outside of Kingpin and Luke Cage, the comic arcs I named earlier largely occurred 10, 15, even 20 years ago. Even President Lex, which has often become a sort of shorthand for our current moment, is still a storyline that's more than 20 years old. The past 8 years have influenced the world of superhero comics in plenty of ways, but the most effective and profound have been a bit more complex and allegorical than using the actual arena of politics. Mayor Fisk has been the biggest and most high-profile exception of that, telling a story that maybe mirrors our current moment a little bit too closely, but still uses a fundamentally different man and a different set of stakes to do so. Even if we don't realize it, all of this is probably clouding how we feel about Bucky suddenly and kind of inexplicably becoming a congressman. There could still be a really admirable and interesting narrative beat to him taking on that role, but in our current moment and in the limited amount of runtime that the MCU has until Secret Wars, who knows how much we'll be able to even get out of it. How do you feel about Bucky becoming a congressman in the MCU? Are you excited for Thunderbolts? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. Merch is available at the link in the description. As always, you can find me on social media at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, go read some comics.